The audience filing into the Arlington Theater on February 7th, 2025, knew they were in for a special treat. As part of the 40th annual Santa Barbara International Film Festival, those in attendance would not only be seeing a live Q&A with one of Hollywood's most endearing, iconic stars, but they would also be the first American audience to see the star's latest movie, an unexpectedly long-awaited sequel that had had one previous screening in September of 2024 at the 81st Venice International Film Festival, but which otherwise remained a subject of speculation regarding any other upcoming release, despite at one time having already been scheduled for a wide domestic theatrical release. The star in question was Kevin Costner, and the movie, written by, directed by, and starring Costner, was Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 2, the second installment in a planned 4-film series, which has become one of the most intriguing movie franchises in the current cinematic landscape, though not necessarily for the reasons its creator had intended. That Costner would choose to make an epic western at this stage of his career was not in and of itself entirely surprising. Ever since one of his early scene-stealing roles in 1985's Silverado, Costner has clearly remained interested in the western genre, and has made an effort to remain involved in and arguably even preserve the genre's place in Hollywood history, long after its arguable golden days. Whether it be his Oscar-winning directorial debut, Dances with Wolves in 1990, or playing Wyatt Earp in 1994's film of the same name, or returning to the director's chair for 2003's Open Range, widely considered to be one of the best westerns of the modern era, Costner has remained connected to the genre, even up to and including his decision to star in Taylor Sheridan's 2018 neo-western TV series Yellowstone. But what makes Horizon unique is Costner's plan for the saga, which some would call impressively ambitious, but others have labeled foolishly misguided. Originally conceived as a single film in 1988, and later pitched to Disney as a potential follow-up to Open Range, the project languished in development hell for decades until 2022, when Costner announced he was finally moving forward, but with a twist. The story would now be spread out over 4 epic-length installments, with over 170 speaking roles, and while it would ultimately be distributed by Warner Brothers, the actual project itself would be largely financed by Costner himself, with the star spending $38 million of his own fortune on the making of the first 2 installments. Costner even left the wildly successful Yellowstone in the middle of its final season, at least partly because he chose to instead concentrate on Horizon, a move that showed how serious he was about the whole enterprise, but also left many wondering if he was truly doing his career any favors with this passion project. Sure enough, both during its Cannes Film Festival premiere in May of 2024, and when it hit American theaters a month later on June 28th, Horizon Chapter 1 was met with a mixed response. While the film definitely had its fans who declared it a beautiful triumph and a return to the feel of classic westerns, it also had many detractors who complained about its many storylines and characters, and how its inherently incomplete nature made it feel more like the beginning of a TV miniseries than an actual theatrical film. More disappointing than the critical response, though, was the lackluster box office. In the wake of the film's poor financial performance, the theatrical release of Chapter 2, originally planned to follow 2 months later, was instead indefinitely postponed, ostensibly so that the first film could have extra time to find its audience on home video and streaming platforms. And though by most accounts the film has been fairly successful in the digital market, outside of the aforementioned Santa Barbara screening, there is still no officially announced planned release date, and questions remain whether Costner will even be able to find the funding to film and complete the saga's final 2 installments, despite his public assurances that he will somehow do so. Whether Horizon ends up being a story of individual artistic determination and success, or an infamous aborted franchise and monument to creative hubris, it's not surprising Costner would choose to try to do it all his own way, given his previous personal history with some failed Hollywood franchise starters. But then again, it's also true that if he had been a part of a successful franchise, say in a Nick Fury-type mentor role in a multi-character spy movie universe, for example, it's arguable he would have had more clout and more money to make Horizon happen. Whether that's enough reason to mourn the failure of this episode's film is, of course, open to debate. The year is 2014, and Paramount Pictures are ready, once again, to reboot one of their most popular series with a new origin and a new, younger leading man, and in the process, hopefully relaunch a beloved cinematic spy thriller franchise with Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And we're not just podcasters anymore. We're operational now.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I think we should, just this once, I think I want to redub our podcast. We usually kind of label it as Failure to Franchise with Trev and Chris. I think it's important for this episode we call it Trev and Chris : Failure to Franchise. Keeping with the naming convention that we will talk about for sure with this film, which is the second in our FebruaRYAN series, our month dedicated to the failed Jack Ryan films, not the successful ones. That's not what we do over here. Why have a good time?
Yeah, we wallow in the filth.
Yeah, we wallow in the misery and the filth and the failure and the disappointment. And that brings us to 2014's Jack Ryan : Shadow Recruit. Chris, why don't you tell us about this entry, the second reboot in a row for the Jack Ryan franchise?
For sure. And before I rattle off names like usual, this is kind of filled with F2F alums.
Yeah.
So just for the listener who may be new to the podcast, of course, last episode is The Sum of All Fears, so go check that one out. But let me just list off a couple people involved with this movie first and foremost. Keira Knightley's in this movie. We talked about King Arthur a few episodes, a couple of years ago at this point. Kevin Costner is in this movie. We talked about Waterworld. Kenneth Branagh is in this movie, and we talked about Artemis Fowl. Yes, kind of. Go listen to that episode.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So I say all that, and there's a couple of F2F to comes in this movie too. Gemma Chan is in this movie. We will definitely talk about the Eternals one day. And I thought there was somebody else that we'd be talking about, but you know what?
Well, I mean, Chris Pine will probably talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I don't really believe them when they say that that's still a thing, So
we will talk about Chris Pine at some point. We created a theme month that we shall not tell you right now because it's not set in stone.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, this is directed by Kenneth Branagh. Famed thespian actor, Much Ado About Nothing, Hamlet, big Shakespeare guy. He has now been directing a lot in the last 10 plus years. He directed Thor, Cinderella, and the Perot trilogy.
Well, he was always a director. I think it's probably more relevant to say he's been directing a lot of studio blockbusters in the last 10 years. That's what's surprising.
Yes.
If you had told anyone in the 80s and 90s that Kenneth Branagh would one day direct a Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, it might have seemed odd, but it doesn't feel odd anymore, knowing what we know about his post-career after this.
Totally. This is, of course, based on the Tom Clancy novels, written by Adam Kozad. He is an F2F to come because he wrote The Legend of Tarzan. We'll talk about that movie one day. He also wrote the movie Underwater, which is that really cool, down and dirty creature feature with
Kristen Stewart. Love that
Kristen
movie.
Stewart. That's a good movie.
Yeah, so underrated. That's a movie that it was one of those that just came out and totally sank at the box office, pun intended. But I really wish that would pick up at least more of a cult following.
Yeah, I agree. It is also written by David Koepp, one of the great writers. He wrote my favorite movie of all time, Jurassic Park. He is writing the new one that's coming out this year, Rebirth. He's also an F2F alum because he wrote The Shadow and The Mummy reboot with Tom Cruise. Both movies we talked about as well. But let's give him some better credit. He wrote Mission Impossible, Spider-Man, and like I said, Jurassic Park.
Also, I always like to point out whenever David Koepp gets brought up, because everyone always goes to Jurassic Park and Spider-Man, and obviously I love those movies, of course, as well. And but I always just like to throw in too Stir of Echoes, a really cool ghost movie with Kevin Bacon that he did, which I think that's another one I wish had more attention. But definitely go check that out for all you Koepp heads out there.
Totally. So a lot of homework for new Failure to Franchise people. That's all I kind of wanted to say up front, and maybe go back and listen to some. The budget of Shadow Recruit is $60 million. Domestically, it made $50 million, and worldwide, it made $135 million. So, not great to start off this new franchise, especially compared to the other Jack Ryan movies. This opened below all of them. Despite having a wider theater count, and it's the lowest grossing Jack Ryan film out of all of them. So no wonder this just kind of died on arrival.
And this is the death of Jack Ryan as a theatrical franchise. Yep. After this, it kind of goes on ice for a little bit, and then we talked about it. This is nice. If you want to really hear all of like what is the Jack Ryan franchise and what do we think about the Jack Ryan franchise, go back to our last episode, Some of All Fears. That's where we kind of explain the history of it and like the overall concept of it. But we did mention in that episode that after this, they rebooted as a TV series on Amazon Prime. Little correction corner. Last episode we said that it was only 3 seasons. A buddy of ours pointed out there was actually 4 seasons. So I guess I'm 2 seasons behind on that show. But still a successful TV series in the wake of the crash and burn of this last theatrical effort.
Definitely. So this movie comes 12 years after The Sum of All Fears. Right. And of course, kicks Ben Affleck to the side. We discussed Ben Affleck in detail in the last episode, but Gigli is the movie that basically cans his ass.
Yeah.
Mace Neufeld, the famed producer of all these movies, has said as much. Is that was a huge flop, and just the string of flops that was happening in between these 12 years for Ben Affleck.
And we talked about this last time too, and like public, problems as well. It just became kind of an albatross around, the neck of any potential franchise kind of attempt, I think. So
I do think though, it's pretty crazy that it took 12 years. Hey, like when Mace Neufeld was talking about rebooting Sum of All Fears, it was 7 years after the last one. And that felt like a long time, so much so that he was like, we'll just cast somebody else and nobody will really give a shit, right? Because it's been so long. 12 years is quite a bit, especially in this day and age.
Especially since, as we mentioned in the last episode too, Some of All Fears was not a financial failure. It was a financial hit. It was just like we said, it was the Ben Affleck problem is kind of what got in the way of sequels for that one. But it was enough of a hit that you think they would have tried to just recast and keep chugging along. But I guess that is the thing, right? If you lose your leading man, it probably forces some level of we got to rethink this a little bit. What do we do moving forward? Do we just like go ahead with the sequel and say he's the same guy, or do we obviously we get to what we have here, which is another reboot? But there's something interesting in between that I did not know about until seeing the research and dossier you sent me. We want to talk about that. The person who almost took over the Jack Ryan franchise.
In 2008, Sam Raimi was approached to take over this franchise. Ultimately didn't because he was working on an unproduced Spider-Man 4 at that time. But I found that interesting as well. Again, it's weird to see like a Sam Raimi too. Maybe not anymore. Stick in the realm of blockbusters. It was a little shocking when he came back for Doctor Strange, and then but I guess I don't know.
I think of Sam Raimi as like the guy. He can walk in both worlds. Obviously, he can make the small little, bizarre horror movies, but he can also do these big blockbusters. Obviously, with the Spider-Man films, and like he's had some less successful ones, like the Oz movie that we'll look at someday, unfortunately. But I think it's more to me. I love Sam Raimi. He's one of my guys. I like the Jack Ryan franchise, as we talked about last time. I don't connect those two things in my head, right? Like this doesn't seem like a franchise I would particularly want to see Sam Raimi involved in. Now, I might be wrong. Maybe if he's a fan of the books or whatever, maybe he had an interesting take, but it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like his vibe,
No, it doesn't.
I like him on comic book-esque properties or pulp-esque properties, or even like a Western, like Quick and the Dead, where he can be a little bit more stylistic and over the top. And I think the Jack Ryan movies, necessitate a little bit more of a grounded approach to a certain degree. So it just seems odd to think of him as being involved in it. So I'm not sad that didn't happen. It's just an interesting thing to think about as a what if.
I agree. He's almost too stylized for this type of slice of Americana, as I like to say about these movies. Philip Noyce directed two of these movies, and he's a very journeyman director in the best way, right? And Sam Raimi maybe would be distracting, maybe stylistically. I'm not sure.
So, yeah. I think so. I think like I don't know that this is the kind of series where you want the director imprint to take over. It's a strange thing to say, right? That's kind of true with Bond as well, right? Obviously, you want good directors to make the movies, but there's a certain just stylistic approach that that kind of needs to be in place. And I think when you get Sam Raimi involved, you're excited to have it be very Raimi-esque, you know?
Yeah.
In fact, like even my issues with his Doctor Strange movie is that I felt like that movie was like thrilling whenever you could feel the Raimi-ness of it, and then I thought like there was other times you can feel like him kind of under the thumb of Marvel, and so that was like a movie of like ups and downs for me.
Yeah.
And I would just worry that with Jack Ryan, he wouldn't be able to go full Raimi. That would be my concern.
Sure. So yeah, they are in need of a director. They're also in need of a star. And first comes the star. They're looking at Chris Pine in 2009. I mean, I guess for obvious reasons. I mean, when Star Trek comes out, huge hit, the reboot. Non-Star Trek and Star Trek fans alike seem to be like, oh, this is good. Like, I think especially coming off of Nemesis, right? Nemesis was the last one before.
I don't know. I've never heard of any of these. I don't know what you're talking about.
See, did you like that I tried to take the lead of Star Trek and then immediately abandoned ship?
Yeah, you're like, I can't let Trev get the reins on this one. No, obviously we have to talk about it a little bit here because this is like this is the movie star machine in place, right? The idea of like, you know, Chris Pine had been in some things before Star Trek, but obviously that's his breakthrough role. And I guess I should just say Star Trek 2009 rules, first of all.
Yeah.
Even though, like, on paper, a lot about it seems like something I should have hated, and I very much was apprehensive when it came along, right, to the idea of, oh man, why are they rebooting it? You know, I really didn't want a reboot of like a continuity that had been going forever, and they came up with a very clever way to do a reboot and not eliminate that continuity.
Yeah.
But also just like the concern of like, man, you have these iconic characters, I never thought they would recast them, and I didn't really know who Chris Pine was, like the rest of the world, and went to see that movie and was just not only blown away by how fun the film was and how, yes, it's a big, dumb action spectacle, but still feels just Trek enough. And it was like, yeah, this is nice. It's like it's hitting all the sweet spots for me.
Yeah.
But it was just an instant star-making performance because he perfectly embodied the spirit of Kirk without doing a Shatner impression, which I think was the big concern, right? Like, oh God, is he gonna try and do the Shatner voice? And he didn't, but he found the attitude and he found the humanity and everything in there. And I loved that movie. I loved him coming out of it. And it's one of those, like, we actually talked about this with Ben Affleck last time too, though, right? Where then Hollywood is like, okay, well, we have this new star, we have this like new factor. What do we do with it, right? And we got to like start shoving it forward. And even into this, like, this is Paramount, the same studio that was in charge of Star Trek, so they feel protective of him, I think, right? They're like, well, he's already like our poster boy for one franchise. Why don't we just really get him locked in and make him the poster child for two of our franchises? Yeah.
I will say, though, less major bombs than Ben Affleck, especially like on paper and culturally. You know?
But you know what else I'll say? Less giant hits than Ben Affleck as well.
Well, yeah, you're right. He's a very... Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, he's not a blockbuster actor yet.
His career is strange, right? Because everybody knows Chris Pine, and like I said, like he came firing out of the cannon with Star Trek. I don't know that his career has ever hit the highs that I think you would have expected after Star Trek. Yeah. And I think we'll even talk about that. I think this movie is like one of the last kind of efforts to position him as a particular kind of leading man. And I think after this, I think both he and Hollywood realized how to better utilize him. Because he's become more of like a character actor. You know, he's one of those character actors with leading man good looks. But I think it's become more obvious that it's, you know, even something is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but like in the wake of this, right? The idea that a guy who was a leading man, or I guess at this time still ostensibly is a leading man, was willing to just play the love interest in Wonder Woman. You know, like that's like what a great call, and he's great in that, right? And it just kind of, I think that unlocked something where it was like, okay, this guy doesn't need to be front and center. He doesn't need to be the titular character or anything. And I think once that was like a little unlocked, I think his career has been in a better spot since then. And he's just also like super beloved, it feels like everybody loves Chris Pine. Yeah.
I think what helps is his debut was in a incredibly casted ensemble piece in Star Trek 2009. So like, of course we all loved Chris Pine, but I think you can love literally everybody in that movie. And I think
it's also like an IP that was gigantic, right?
Yes.
I mean, bigger than the Jack Ryan IP, you know.
Totally. But I think Chris Pine never... I mean, he doesn't strike me as a man with a crazy ego, a crazy movie star ego, like really at all, especially like you're saying that the roles he's taken in the last 10 years for sure.
He didn't even care when Harry Styles spit on him at that screening.
One of my absolute favorite Hollywood controversies, by the way. That was a great month. But
all culminating in a piece of shit movie.
Yes, that movie was not good. It was not good. He was not good.
He was good in it. I remember that. Yeah,
he was. Yeah. But no, I like Chris Pine a lot. I like seeing him. I think he's really funny. I think he's got great comedic timing. He's like when he pops up in Horrible Bosses 2, he's great. You know,
or the Wet Hot American Summer series, he was great.
Oh my god, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he oozes charisma, but he's got that slight edge of like smarminess, but you don't hate him. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about it though. Like it's interesting like what we're saying, and as I'm looking through his filmography now, you know, I mentioned like Wonder Woman, but even like the year before Wonder Woman, he also did Hell or High Water, which was like a really like critically acclaimed, you know, Taylor Sheridan movie that I think was like okay, so and he seems to be settling into like what he should be now, right? But if you really think about it, see if you would agree, this isn't the only movie where he's like the star. But this really is. Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit is kind of the only movie in his entire filmography that tried to center him as the sort of leading man that you would have expected post-Star Trek. Because even the Star Trek sequels are still ensemble pieces, right? And then you have hits like Unstoppable, but that's also Denzel Washington, you know? And then the other ones, like there's other ones, but they're kind of smaller stakes, something like The Finest Hours or
This Means War, like with Renee Zellweger and
or The Contractor, right? He's never put front and center in another big franchise attempt except for this, really. This is kind of the one and done of that. So, yeah.
He's been smart. He's been smart.
Yeah, he's got a good career. Like I said, you can't point to him as having any gigantic hits that are like on his shoulders, but he never bears the brunt of like these giant failures.
Totally.
Except for maybe this one we're going to talk about today. But you know. So.
Yeah.
But he rebounded. But he rebounded from this wisely, right? So that's
Yeah, 100%. So just to kind of put a button on that with Chris Pine, like he's the guy. And for obvious reasons, Paramount and Skydance want to basically hand him keys to another castle. But still, they still need a director. They go to Jack Bender, famed Lost director. Lost is, you know what, probably my favorite show of all time. Lost, you know, Buffy, Angel, those three kind of go back and forth. Obviously, Seinfeld and Curb, of course, but I mean for like straight up dramas, Lost I think I've watched in its entirety like 5 times, and I just love it. So Jack Bender.
Well, the thing you love about Lost, Buffy, and Angel is how unproblematic all the behind the scenes stuff was with all three of those shows.
Of course, I'm drawn to it. So yes, Jack Bender is attached. They're looking at a script that was on the blacklist by Adam Kozad. I was confused by this. I was trying to find the actual real name of the script. So I only found it was either titled Moscow or it was titled Dubai.
So when it was on the blacklist,
both titles are bad.
When it was on the blacklist, which for those who don't know, the blacklist, I think they actually stopped doing it just recently. But the blacklist was a screenwriting Hollywood inner industry thing where every year this committee would publish all the best unproduced scripts, like the scripts that they thought had the most potential to be made into movies. And once that was published and there was this top 20 or whatever, the hope was that studios would now swoop in and purchase these scripts and maybe they would get made. And a lot of them did, right? And when this script was on the blacklist, it was called Dubai. And then I think after it was sold, it started to be it was changed to Moscow, probably because they just felt like that was a more interesting locale or fit more politically safe at the time or whatever. But yeah, it's the Moscow form that I think gets turned into this.
Okay. Well, it gets rewritten a bunch of times. And
it doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah. Uncredited writer Steve Zalian comes on and writes a draft. I name him because he wrote Clear and Present Danger. But then David Koepp comes on and he rewrites it again, and Bender drops out because they've delayed this movie a bunch of times too, because Chris Pine has to go reprise his role as Kirk on Trev's favorite Star Trek film, Star Trek Into Darkness from 2012.
Yeah, remember everything I just said about the Star Trek 2009? Invert that, and that's how I feel about Star Trek Into Darkness. But now that said, not the cast's fault. Well,
No.
maybe Cumberbatch a little bit, but well,
Yeah,
he's just miscast, so I'm not going to throw it at his feet. But not I know you enjoy that movie. You don't have the same baggage with it that I do for obvious reasons, but no bueno. That is a bad movie, I think. So.
Which is so funny you say that, but yet Trev is a glutton for punishment. He recently rewatched it about 2 weeks ago. And it popped up on my Letterboxd. Go follow us there, by the way. Links are in the bio of this episode. But I saw it pop up on Trev's feed there, and I immediately texted him that he's a psychopath.
Not only did I rewatch it, but I rewatched it like a day or two after watching Star Trek 31, Section 31, which was the other worst Star Trek movie I've ever seen. And that was part of it. I was like, I was like saying like I think I like this like a little bit more than Into Darkness. It's like, well, I gotta confirm this. And as I told you, I'd actually started a full franchise rewatch like years ago.
Right.
And after I watched 2009, I just stopped. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do Into Darkness. So I was like, you know what, I should probably just finally go back and scratch that itch. I hadn't rewatched it since the theater, and so there's always the possibility, right, that maybe I was wrong. I wasn't. It sucks. But.
Hey, at least we can agree. I mean, I haven't watched it in a long time either, and I don't have the baggage like you do, as you said. However, let's agree that they rebound way better with Beyond.
Beyond is awesome.
Beyond's awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then because they get Justin Lin from the Fast franchise, he leaves that. Directs
well,
Beyond,
and
Beyond's
also
great.
like
and
Simon
then,
Pegg writes it, and like brings a real
right.
like actual Trek feeling to it for the kind of the first time in that franchise, even though I do like the first one. So yeah.
And then Justin Lin goes back to Fast franchise to really put a fucking nail in its coffin. But anyway, so that sucks. Okay, they hire Kenneth Branagh to do this movie. I think at this point it's because he directed Thor just recently. Yeah. This guy's the blockbuster guy. This guy is the tell him to point the camera and he'll shoot it. He says sounds good.
Yeah, that's just strange because, like, as you said, up until that point, he was primarily known for doing kind of like more classical, like Shakespeare, adaptations. I remember when he was signed on to direct Thor, that was like really weird at the time. I was at the Comic-Con panel for like Thor, and just even seeing him on like the Comic-Con stage, I'm like, I like Thor comics, so why wouldn't I direct this? And it's like, because you're Kenneth Branagh, It just felt so weird. And the thing he always says whenever he directs one of these, and he says it again in like the press for this one, is I think he knows that like people, not anymore, but at the time, I think he was like, of course people are surprised I'm doing this, but he's like, to be fair, these are the movies I like to watch. Yes, sure. I like to make, I enjoy Shakespeare. I want to do Henry V and Much Ado About Nothing and Hamlet. Those are his passion projects. But he's like, I'm a human being. I also like watching dumb blockbusters. Yeah, so I think for him, it's kind of like, let me try this out. And also, of course, a little change in the pocket ain't too bad either,
No, of course.
So, yeah.
Yeah, needed to put a pool in his second home.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of, I don't know if I want to say sad, because it's like he made Belfast, so I can't say it's entirely the case. But it is strange that after Thor and Jack Ryan, he just basically only becomes a blockbuster director. Like I said, apart from Belfast, he kind of hasn't gone back to doing the kind of more, critic, baiting movies he was doing at the beginning. But hey, if it's better for his bank account, then more power to him, I suppose.
Yeah. And I'm not watching Belfast.
I liked Belfast. But that's the thing is, it was movies I liked it, and I was like, okay, I like that. I watched it the one time. We'll never watch it again. And it's like, there's always certain movies like this. You and I talk about them sometimes where I'll watch it and I'll go like, yeah, that's good. Why is it in the Best Picture consideration? That was really bizarre to me, So, yeah.
But yeah, he is gonna direct this movie. He's coerced the studio into making him the villain as well.
Double paycheck.
Yeah, that's great. He's been doing that a little bit recently. Hey, he did the villain for this, and then he's the villain in Tenet. You still haven't seen Tenet, have you?
I have not. No.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do I need to? I don't know. I feel like I keep hearing mixed things on it. So.
Yeah, I saw it in IMAX when the shutdown was all on. I was like, that was one of the ones that I was like, oh my god, yeah, I have to go. And it's like a sensory kind of experience I felt, but also I'm Mr. Rules guy. Like, you know this, and long-term listeners know this. I love my rules, and Tenet just breaks every one of its rules. but also tells you the rules. And I think that's like the worst. So it's like, it's weird because I did buy the 4K Blu-ray because I wanted to watch it with my brother. My brother didn't want to go see it in theaters because I told him, you can barely understand anybody. So he's like, okay, buy the Blu-ray, come over, and we'll put the subtitles on. And I will say, with the subtitles, it was a better experience. And in like my, big setup and as loud as possible, basically rumbling the whole fucking neighborhood. That was fun. But I remember like pausing it halfway through and for like a bathroom break or something. And my brother looked at me. He's like, I have no fucking clue what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, that's Tenet. So
we should point out with Kenneth Branagh, because you mentioned at the start that he's a F2F alum as a director for Artemis Fowl, but he's also an F2F alum as an actor. And in fact, he's an F2F alum as a villain in a blockbuster, because he was also the bad guy in your beloved Wild Wild West as well. So,
oh my God, how could I forget?
That is one thing to keep in mind about him is, like we say, at this time, this was still when it was odd to think of him as like the director of Thor and the director of Jack Ryan. But even in the lead up to that, he had never been shy about appearing in like movies like, crazy big blockbusters, even in Wild Wild West, using the Harry Potter films. So he did seem like an actor who was willing to have fun as well. So that's the thing. He's like, I made that joke earlier about walking in both worlds. I think he is kind of able to do that as well. And I think it's now he's found his like sweet spot with that. And he's actually found a successvel franchise with the Perot films, which have like the patina of kind of like critical acclaim behind them because they're based on Agatha Christie. But even I haven't seen them, but you can just tell from the trailers that like he's being very hammy in them and over the top. Yeah. So he's able to have fun, but still make kind of somewhat classy movies, and they do really well.
For sure.
Yeah.
The only two other actors I want to just mention, before actually talking about the movie, is Kevin Costner is cast in this. A guy that really knows nothing about Jack Ryan. He's been saying he never read the books, nothing. And then Keira Knightley as the love interest, as Kathy, the fuck's his last name?
Mueller.
Okay, because I was thinking, do I say Mueller or do I say Ryan? Not yet, not Kathy Ryan yet. She's in here, and we've talked about her. I like Keira Knightley a lot. We'll talk about her in this movie, but she's yeah.
When she was cast after like some other considerations, like they were all, we like talking about like the what ifs and the almost one. They also looked at Felicity Jones and Evangeline Lilly. Of course, that was probably when like Bender was involved, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure.
And then Keira Knightley only gets it after Kate Beckinsale and Jessica Biel declined, so that's where she wins it. And then with Costner, the Costner casting is interesting because we'll talk about the character he plays and his role in this film, but. It's important to remember he was also one of their considerations for Jack Ryan back originally for Hunt for October, and he only turned it down to do Dances with Wolves. Probably smart call on his part.
Yeah. But, it's funny too because he was, this was in 2012 to 2014, right, when this movie's really off to the races, to being put together. We are in full cinematic universe mode right now, like with the Marvel stuff, and everybody's racing to catch up and do something like that. They hire Kevin Costner as the character Thomas Harper to eventually bridge the gap between a Jack Ryan franchise and then a John Clark franchise. John Clark, we've only briefly mentioned in the last episode for being Michael B. Jordan did a movie playing him, right?
Eventually Michael B. Jordan makes the movie that was going to be the second part of this 2-picture deal with Costner. Like he was supposed to be Thomas Harper in this, and then he was going to be Thomas Harper in Without Remorse, which is the John Clark origin story. After this fails, that version of Without Remorse kind of falls apart, and ultimately Michael B. Jordan, snags it up and makes it. But we mentioned last time, like in Sum of All Fears, it was Liev Schreiber as John Clark. Of course, Willem Dafoe was John Clark in I think it's I always get these names confused. Clear and Present Danger, the third one. But he's kind of like the more he's the wet works guy in this universe, right? If Jack Ryan likes to tell you he's just an analyst, John Clark is just a badass soldier.
Talk about carts before horses, right? Like it's been a while since we've covered a movie that maybe was starting to bridge a cinematic universe of sorts. But this, like I said, this is right in the thick of it. This is when everybody's catching up.
You brought it up now. I was like waiting to see if we would bring it up now or when we got into the review, but like in maybe multiple ways. And this obviously being the most obvious one. This film very much represents the MCU-ification of the Jack Ryan franchise.
Yes, big time.
And he said like the shared universe. And I believe what they were looking at was they were going to have Tom Hardy play John Clark in like that film. And obviously, of course, the idea was, well, eventually we'll build to a movie with Chris Pine and Tom Hardy. You know, they've already done it before, so why, another, which I believe was another spy movie. So why not just do it again? But
yeah, I mean, it's annoying. It's annoying.
I get to their credit. The only thing I can say is when you say like I agree with you, and it's obviously we've looked before. There's like the dark universe and things where everyone's like, let's just start with this idea of a shared universe. At least here they're just saying, well, let's do the shared universe that does already exist in the books, right? Like that, like it already like. Jack Ryan and John Clark are a shared universe in the literary property already because there are John Clark, like novels and there are Jack Ryan novels. So they're being somewhat true to that. Now, the odd thing about that is this is the first Jack Ryan movie that's not based on a Clancy novel. So it is weird to like start your shared universe with an original story and then be like, and then be like, well, but then we're going to do it without remorse. It's like, okay, so it's already getting a little like off the center here, but yeah, whatever. I get where they're coming from.
Did it work?
No.
Did you want to just talk about the reasons why it didn't work?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
This is quarterback. I have a situation. Somebody tried to kill me.
Jack, is work okay?
Yeah. You know, you sold this as an office job.
Why don't you sit down? Now talk me through your very scary scenario. Keep in mind, I don't have your PhD.
Tokyo, London, the United States. It's gonna be a wipeout. We'll never see it coming.
You're not just an analyst anymore. You're operational now.
Jack?
I have to go to Moscow.
Why don't you want me to come?
Because I'm gonna be working the whole time. They play rough over there, Jack. Victor Cherevin is unpredictable.
You Americans like to think of yourselves as direct. Perhaps you are just rude.
Perhaps you're just touchy. Jack, you got another problem.
What are you doing here?
You lied to me for 3 years. Somebody
Come on, of course not. Can we have a minute, please?
No. This is geopolitics, not couples therapy.
Partnerships are delicate, Mr. Ryan. Sometimes they end violently.
What the hell is going on here?
Sometimes the ones closest to us are the ones we should trust the least. We all have our secrets.
You think this is game, Jack?
They will bring us to our knees without even firing a shot.
There's a very real scenario here where we don't get out of this alive.
We are compromised.
If you find the truth, will you believe it? Oh my God.
After the tragedy of 9/11, Jack Ryan, a bright student at the London School of Economics, finds himself thrust into a military career. In less than 2 years, he is deployed to Afghanistan, where a helicopter accident damages his back. While in rehab, Jack meets his soon-to-be fiancée, Dr. Kathy Mueller. While recuperating, Thomas Harper, a seasoned CIA officer, recognizes Ryan's unique talents and offers him a position within the CIA's Financial Intelligence Unit. Fast forward a decade, Ryan now leads a double life as a compliance officer on Wall Street and has begun to uncover a financial terrorism scheme against America brewing in Russia. Jack Ryan is then sent to Russia to investigate in person, and then the movie becomes like every other spy movie you've ever seen, but this time with a clingy girlfriend in tow for inexplicable reasons.
All right, that was like a more detailed than your usual plot synopsis, and all building to just a total dismissiveness at the end. So
Yes,
I have a feeling from that I know what you're going to say about this. But Chris, why don't you go first on Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit?
Yeah, okay, so this is my second time watching this movie. I think I forgot that I saw it the first time. And that basically tells you where I'm going with this. This movie should just be called Spy Agent: the movie. There's a bunch of secret agent characters out there. So I'm gonna play around here. Is this guy James Bourne? Is he Jack Bond? Is he Ethan Ryan? You know, is this a Mission Impossible movie? Is this a James Bond movie? Is this a Bourne movie? It's basically a poor collage of all of those movies. So there's like no identity to it. It's just so bland, so generic. And this came out the year of Ghost Protocol. And when Ghost Protocol came out, that movie was a fucking showstopper. Big action scenes, big excitement. It was just so much fun. The problem is Jack Ryan shouldn't be Ethan fucking Hunt. And this is a movie, like you said, the MCU-ification of it all. This is a movie where it starts saying that my character has a broken back and has to go through rehab, but then also does death-defying stunts on motorcycles and car accidents and running around and getting shot at and takes down fucking huge goons and like doesn't ever even limp. And again, that's still not Jack Ryan. And that just really annoys me. And man, the eye roll that I had to give any involvement having Kathy here. I had my problems with the Sum of All Fears playing up the romantic angle just a bit. Because I'm like, okay, I get it. Okay, Ben Affleck, he's the heartthrob. I get it. We got to get girls in this movie too. And we got to get a date night going. So like, fair enough. But Bridget Moynahan's character never got involved in the action. And if Jack Ryan is supposed to be this super smart analyst that is kind of playing chess instead of checkers and got to be 10 steps ahead of other people because of all his knowledge, why in the fucking world would he agree to have his girlfriend involved in this plot to help out? And of course, it doesn't end well, right? like it's just... This movie makes Jack Ryan seem like a total idiot. And Chris Pine, I just talked about how much I like him, but he gives off a level of frat boy energy, which is something that I like about him, and he's still charming and suave and that smarmy Captain Kirk, but that's not Jack Ryan. And I know I'm a newcomer-ish to this whole franchise, but this movie proves that it is very hard to make a movie about young Jack Ryan. It's just another attempt that is hard. I like A Sum of All Fears. I liked it a lot. This one proves it's very, very difficult to get your young, hot actor and young, hot Jack Ryan. I just don't think it meshes, and it just becomes a total nothing burger spy movie I've seen a million times. So we can get into specifics, obviously, but I'll throw it to you and see if you're on the same wavelength here.
I think it's interesting you said this movie proves it's hard to make a young Jack Ryan movie, because what I think this really proves is that it's just hard to make a Jack Ryan movie. I think you can take the young out of it, right? I think it's hard to make a Jack Ryan movie in the 2010s when, as you said, they're finally realizing they're like, what is the thing that separates Jack Ryan from Bond and Mission Impossible and Bourne? And for a while that was he's an analyst. Like, that's the cool thing, right? He's like, but it's like, yeah, but how many movies can you do that in a row for? Like, at what point does that become like, well, if he's just an analyst, why does he keep getting involved in these missions? Yeah. You can feel this movie really struggling with that, and really struggling with what's the actual identity of this franchise, and if we want this to become a successful blockbuster franchise and not just like a mid-budget, kind of a small little spy thriller, what do we have to like bring in from all the other spy movies and try to like, and so this is a movie that's like struggling with its identity. Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting is this, for me, this watch was very similar to my Sum of All Fears watch, except like a mirror version of it. Because I mentioned in our last episode that Sum of All Fears was a movie that I'd never seen in total, but I'd seen bits and pieces on TV, and I was never super into it. And then during this watch, even though I didn't end up loving it, I kind of came away with more respect from it than I thought I would. And I was like, it's not too bad. This is a movie I saw in the theater and actually quite liked in the theater. And on this watch, it came down for me. Now, that said, I'm going to be more positive than you only in this sense. So before you jump down my throat about this, I ultimately think I like this and Sum of All Fears about the same, but for completely different reasons. Like the highs and lows of both of them are completely different. And I did think it was kind of fun to watch both of them in a row because they're both so emblematic and representative of the era they were made in. Like Sum of All Fears so much feels like an early 2000s movie, and this so much feels like a post-MCU attempt at a Jack Ryan movie, a 2010s a Jack Ryan movie. So it was like really kind of fun to compare the two of them. I don't hate this movie. We called Sum of All Fears a good dad movie. I want to throw in another term. If we like to use dad movie, I'd call this a good like laundry movie. This is the kind of movie you might have on while you're like folding laundry, so you can just like look up every once in a while and be like, and kind of like lightly chuckle at some scenes.
That's
what
like, you
want
from your action franchise starter.
That's why I said like, look, I'm not coming in like this is a 4-star masterpiece.
Yeah.
But I'm also not coming into like just throw this completely under the bus. I'll talk about the things I like, but I will agree right off the bat that as much as I like Chris Pine, just as I don't think Ben Affleck was the right casting the last time, Pine's not the guy here either. And again, as we said with Affleck, that might be a script problem, more than it is like the actor. Maybe Chris Pine could have aged into this role. It's interesting because this is also a movie for me that reminds me of how much of a like bitch time is. Because I saw this in the theater, and if you had asked me like when this came out, I probably would have told you like, I saw this in the theater. That was like 2020, 2021 or something. And when I saw it was like 10 years old, I was like, what? I was just like, and like the fact that like Chris Pine is the young Jack Ryan in this, and now today he's like this like silver fox, like handsome man, Again, I was like, oh, maybe the Chris Pine of today would be an interesting Jack Ryan, but he still has that like young Kirk swagger here, and it's not right for the character, and they're trying to accommodate for it by writing a version of Jack Ryan that, as you said, doesn't feel like Jack Ryan. No. So, I mean, I agree with a lot of your issues. I'll just say I kind of still can enjoy this movie as just total, like, paplum, like, spy movie trash. You know what I mean? Like, I would
agree with you if
you mentioned this coming out.
Involved.
See, this is where we're going to have a disagreement because, well, I'm of two minds of this. I don't love Keira Knightley's performance in this, primarily based on the fact that she cannot maintain the American accent to save her life. No. Like it keeps slipping over and over.
It's funny because I'm a big fan of Keira Knightley, obviously. Yeah, totally beautiful, of course. But her mouth and face scream English accent.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Okay.
They also I know this is weird because she lives in our modern day, but I kind of like don't want to see Keira Knightley in anything that takes place in modern day. It's
that's
like
funny. Yeah,
she also just seems like she should exist in the 1800s. I don't know, but that's funny. But yeah, I will. This is where you and I will disagree because I will later on. I don't want to get into it now because it's probably something to talk about. After we get past our just general thoughts. But I think the Kathy involvement is maybe one of the things I find the most interesting about this movie, and kind of like saves it from just being another generic spy thriller to me. So we'll talk about that later, and that's kind of on her and like another actor, not Chris Pine. But you mentioned this coming out the same year as Ghost Protocol, and like it's obviously blown out of the water by that, but like there are also like weeks where you want a fine steak and then a few days later you want like a crappy fast food hamburger, and this kind of like occupies that place for me where I'm like, oh, this isn't good, but like if I'm like kind of paying half attention to it, there's just enough here to slightly get it over the hump. So I'm just a little bit more positive, but I will definitely come with you on some of the complaints and then try to defend some other things.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. Like again, I know we're not so far off because I don't think this is a 1-star movie. Like I don't think that either. I thought maybe you'd be like, just because this movie is doing nothing, like nothing new, nothing at all. And it looks flat. It looks bland. Jack Ryan is not Jack Ryan here. And I don't care if he's young. This is not the guy that gets promoted. Like I need to at least believe that he's smart enough to get promoted at the end to talk to the president, you know, and I just don't buy it at all. Him and Kevin Costner have no chemistry when it comes to a mentor-mentee relationship. Kevin Costner's sleepwalking through the movie. And again, the Keira Knightley thing. I'm sorry, she's like a crazy, clingy girlfriend in this. Like, there's a big like psycho alert in this movie that it just the relationship never works.
I didn't like the moment where she finds, like, she comes to visit. She surprises him when he's in Moscow. She's like, "I'll come visit you."
You mean
like,
he
"No,
follows? She follows him.
I'm gonna be really busy in Moscow. Don't come. And she's already like suspecting that he might be having an affair. And the moment where she, like, unbeknownst to him, she arrives in Moscow and she goes to his hotel and he's told by Costner that she's there. And he walks in and she's found his gun. And she goes, "What is going on?" And he sits down and he goes, like, "I'm in the CIA." And she immediately goes, "Oh, thank God, I thought you were having an affair." No. She just instantly accepts it. And that's what I mean. Like, a moment like that is so stupid, but it makes me laugh. And I'm like, so there are moments like too where like the cheesiness of it kind of gets on me.
That one moment was good.
Yeah. I kind of like Costner in this. I know you said he's sleepwalking. I actually think he's pretty decent, but I also just think that's a byproduct of him having a natural gravitas that he's like earned over time into this. And I think he works in this as like the mentor. I agree Pine's not giving him much in return, but I think he works enough that like if this like connected a universe idea had worked, I think he could have, I think Thomas Harper could have been like the Nick Fury of this franchise. But I'm also like kind of in the bag for Costner, so
I guess I just don't. Okay, Jack Ryan is not Spider-Man, and to connect the David Koepp of it all,
yeah,
I don't give a flying fuck about watching Jack Ryan balance home life and work life. Like I just.
Well, what's interesting is like
the Spider-Man thing, and it just doesn't work with this guy.
That kind of is the most Jack Ryan element of this, right? It's just they're just not like. We talked last time about how Jack Ryan has an everyman aspect to him that Bond and Bourne don't, right? This idea that he does have a family and he has like, so he's trying to be like this like regular person who just gets pulled into these events. And this movie is like paying lip service to that. And I actually mentioned when we did Some of All Fears, we talked about like how the romance just felt like such an afterthought in that movie. And I talked, and if you remember, I was like, yeah, this whole franchise never seems to know what to do with Kathy. And in that episode, I said, I'll put a button in that and remember that for next episode. And this is what I was talking about, where this is the first attempt to say, like, he's got this wife character. What are we going to do with her?
Let's throw her in danger.
Yeah, I mean, you said, like, why would Jack Ryan agree? Like, there is a point in the movie that he does not necessarily agree. It's like he's kind of forced into it by Harper.
But why would Harper do it, though?
Look, because it's a dumb movie. And
that's my point. This is the movie that jumps the shark. This is a jumping the shark moment of getting the wife involved because automatic, immediate, dumb audience emotional attachment, ? It's a jump the shark moment that it's like, I get that they don't know what to do with Kathy, so they throw her in harm's way. But you have a team of CIA operatives that are actually...
It's very funny that the CIA... They can, after Jack Ryan kills someone in his hotel, like who attacks him, like an assassin, right? The CIA comes and in minutes they can clean the entire hotel room,
do construction,
do reconstruction. They can fix the toilet, they can fix the broken shower, they can get rid of the body, they can disappear this person so it's like he never existed, but they don't have an additional female agent to go in as his wife.
I know, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching Gemma Chan as being the girl in the truck.
She has to stay in the truck. She's the only one who knows how to use the keyboard. This is what I mean. So I'm coming along with you, and like where we're having like an impasse here is clearly that like I'm like enjoying the dumbness of it, and you're getting annoyed by the dumbness of it. And that's the thing you mentioned earlier, how you said like it would be better if it should be called like Spy : Secret Agent. Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that, is because I agree. I think it's a bad Jack Ryan movie, but I enjoy it as like a dumb spy movie. And on that level, I think I actually like the. And again, is it what I want to see in a Jack Ryan story? Maybe not. I don't think the idea of having like a spy be like, oh my God, I got to bring my wife along with me on this mission is like the worst idea, right? And I think it kind of works in the scene. And I actually think the scene where he has to take her to the dinner with the villain is actually Chris Pine's best moment in the movie too, because he's asked to play like he's supposed to be. He's like playing a drunk asshole, and like that actually works for him when like that's like the one moment it's like, oh yeah, this is working. But I also think her interaction with the villain, and we'll talk about the villain in a bit. her like whole scene with Chevron or I don't know however you say his name, they have like it's more compelling than anything with Ryan and him.
I agree.
Like, yeah,
I agree.
So that's what I mean. Like the Kathy stuff actually kind of works for me, except for one later moment, which I'll put a button on and come to. But yeah, it's so dumb. I just kind of like it, and I also do think it's like what separates it from every other. Like you said, a lot of this is very, very generic. Yeah. But the oh my god, my wife who has no experience has to come along with me. That's the one thing that kind of separates it. It's got a little bit of a True Lies echo to it. This is no True Lies, of course. But
how dare you? How dare you? I did find again going back to Kathy being like there's just no chemistry between Kathy and Jack because why would Jack Chris Pine is a very handsome, good looking guy, okay, obviously very successful as well in his career, okay, why would he be putting up with Kathy? Like Kathy just seems like so clingy and weird and anxious and everything, like even so much that he's like, why won't you marry me? Like you said yes to getting married, but can't get married. And then like she's following him across the world. He has to I got friends like this, okay, that I know don't listen to this podcast, but I'm not going to name them anyway. But they'll need to call their wives or girlfriends at like midnight to check in. And I'm watching Jack Ryan having to check in after killing a guy in a tub. And it just comes off very, it's just not, it doesn't come off as like a good relationship. So why do I root for it? Like there's a moment where she recognizes Jack's work building before he does.
This is the moment I was talking about.
and I'm like, she's crazy, bro.
I thought that was funny because like they're trying to again so she's already like gone on a mission. She's been put in danger. She's been rescued, and then it's like okay, I guess that's the end of Kathy in this movie, right? No, in a room full of CIA agents, they are looking at pictures that these like terrorists have taken, and she is the only person who clocks. Hey, that's the building Jack works at. Oh my God, they're going to attack Wall Street. Oh, thank God, Dr. Kathy Mueller was there to recognize that even though he works in the building and all these other CIA agents somehow missed it.
It's so funny because she seemingly is a better analyst than Jack in that moment, and then Jack becomes an analyst later by recognizing paint smears.
Yeah, thank God that the van drives by him at that exact moment.
Oh, perfect. And I understand movies, right? Like I get it,
I know.
right? Like,
and actually, to be fair, like I'll be fair too. Sure. Even though I hate the moment where she recognizes the picture, that actually is the one scene where they play Jack Ryan as the Jack Ryan we know, and it's actually kind of one of the more exciting scenes where he's like figuring out how to track this terrorist plot by saying, "Well, let's look. These terrorists were posing as a family in Dearborn, Michigan. Get on all our social media feeds, see where they took their pictures. Okay, now triangulate that with like their friends and family, and like did any of their friends take pictures and post pictures?" And like that's like, oh my God, for like 45 seconds it felt like a Jack Ryan movie. And I love that stuff in spy movies when they're like when they're tracking something that way, you know, like that's like the one moment where you're like, yeah, this feels like Clancy's character, not like you said, a mixture of all these other spies.
The subtitle Shadow Recruit seems like that is Kathy Muller.
I don't. What is that even? What is Shadow Recruit? By the way,
know.
Like
I don't know. Yeah, but
now
I
do.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you a question because you might know this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no! So, you know what? We haven't even mentioned that this movie is an original concept.
I mentioned that when we were talking about the shared universe.
Oh, you
thing.
did.
Yeah,
okay.
This is not a novel. Yeah.
Because the reason why I want to bring that up because they make him like this financial. What am I trying to say? Like he's more like a financial analyst when it comes to crimes and stuff. Is that just because of the times? Obviously, that's compared to.
I think. Well, again, like I have not read the books, right? Sure. So all my Jack Ryan information actually comes from just like filmed versions of him. That does, but yeah, it might just be a thing of the times. That does feel Jack Ryan, right? Like the idea of like he's recruited because he wrote some paper on like the financial aspects of terrorism.
Totally.
And so he's recruited to be put on Wall Street and track this. Like, see that all like the first like 15 minutes or so. I mean, there's some time jumps here I'm going to talk about in a moment, but overall that does feel Jack Ryan. The problem, as you're alluding to, is that what we like about these Jack Ryan movies is it's always played that way, right? He's this analyst who in the third act has to like reluctantly get put into action.
Yeah. And
this movie puts him into action at the end of the first act and kind of never looks back. And from that point on, he just seems like a spy, like a pretty
Totally.
capable spy. And I think that is the problem of like, well, no, I thought he was just like a guy working on Wall Street. And he like puts up like the slightest bit of like protest after he kills someone for the first time in a scene that is like so clearly, again, we talked about them like, oh my God, what do we do? Like, what do we take from like previous like spy movies? His first kill in a bathroom is just the first kill from Casino Royale, right? It's just Bond's first kill.
I know you've been in a hotel before, of course.
Yeah.
You know it takes 20 minutes to fill up a fucking hotel tub, right?
Well, let me ask you even another question about that. So he is picked up at the airport by the villain's like security, and they say like, Mr. Ryan, we're going to take you to your hotel, and you'll go meet Mr. Villain Man, and this guy drives him through Moscow. He's like even pointing out like tourist attractions to him, takes him up to the hotel room, waits till Jack Ryan is like looking out the window where he can see his reflection, then pulls out a gun and tries to shoot him. Buddy, you had him in your back seat. You could have just killed him in the car and dumped his body off the side of the freeway, and this would all be done. Why'd you even bother taking him up to the hotel where there's a maid in the hallway and might hear you do? You know, it's like
Again, movies fine, but when I'm watching a Jack Ryan movie, it needs to be smarter. And I think because of like we keep saying how dumb it gets, even that whole like chase around the hotel room and stuff. It's like, how can this guy not get him? You know what I mean? Like this guy is obviously a hitman. He's got the silencer. He knows what he's doing. But somehow, baby analyst Chris Pine, gets the jump on him and drowns him in 20 minutes of filling up the tub. Like it just doesn't make. It doesn't make sense. I did like, to put a positive, I did like him reeling with murdering somebody for a good 2 minutes. That was good. I like that. But then he becomes Mr. Action Man for the rest of the movie. And
that's what I mean. It's like
me.
the movie never sits with the things that would make it feel more like Jack Ryan. Like I could accept him like somehow actually getting the drop on this guy and killing him. Imagine if like the rest of the movie his like hands were shaking and he was like still like feeling the effects of like murdering a man, but he just gets over it too fast. And it's just like little things like that. I wanted to speak to your point about the chemistry between Kathy and Jack. I think the problem, because you said like, why do I root for these two? The movie does make a strategic problem in the first act in that we see him get his injury in Afghanistan, and then we see him at the hospital, and she is his rehab nurse. She's helping him, and that's where he falls for her, because you would fall for Keira Knightley if she was your rehab nurse. Yeah. And then as he's like getting discharged from the hospital, he asks her out, and she's like, well, no, she's like, I'll tell you what. If eventually you can like run all, because he's like starting to do these like small little runs as his back is starting to feel better, and she's like, if you ever get to the point where you can run this like entire like mile or whatever, then find me and ask me out, and I'll say yes. And he's like, oh, all right. And then the movie jumps forward 10 years, as you said, and they're just together. And I'm like, well, wait. So we never got to see him return to her and ask her out. Like we didn't see this relationship develop. That's the problem.
No,
I think like that time jump and then just putting them together as a couple is like such a mistake, because in a movie like this, if you're like, Kathy's always been more of, like I said, just like a plot function in the previous movies, barely even there. But if you're going to give her like a center stage here, then we want to watch these two fall in love. We don't want to just like jump in and have them be like already living together, but already arguing. Like it's just like, what a weird decision.
Well, that's the thing. If you're going to make them jump in to be together, fine. I need to see them crumbling. I need to see if I'm going to buy that. Every time Keira Knightley or Kathy walks into the apartment, she goes, hey, are you home? And then right out of the shower, she says it again, almost like she's in constant search for this man. And then decides to rummage through his clothes, to find that movie stub, to suspect that he's cheating, and then to interrogate him about it, and to always make him check in with her. Like, I need to see the relationship on the rocks. And because it just starts... First of all, it doesn't even start. Like you said, it just is in the middle of them having the greatest life. And then for whatever reason, I have to believe that Jack Ryan's work is getting in between them. There's just no evidence of that. I haven't seen him be late for dinner. I didn't see him not show up to this certain plan that they had together. Like the next time you see them, they're on a date together and they're looking like they're happy, except, he gets distracted watching the TV. Mm-hmm. Like, you're right that it just does not do the work in any respect. And this movie is not long. I guess that's where I'm coming.
That's
down
another
to
thing
too.
I like about it, though, too. So I want to say,
I
like,
guess you're right.
why I accept it as like dumb fun, like why I like this as like the dumb Jack Ryan movie is like
Sure.
it only takes an hour and 40 minutes of my life, and that feels like appropriate for a dumb spy movie, you know. There's so many ways. There's so many like little fixes you could make on that too. Like I made fun of the part where he tells her I'm in the CIA and she just instantly accepts it. You know what'd be like great in that scene is like instead of just cutting from that and treating it like a joke where it's like, oh, she instantly likes it. Why not have her say like, oh thank God, I always suspected that, and then have her start saying the things she's noticed. You know, where she's like, you know, you did this and you did this, and have it be like, I actually suspected you were a CIA agent for years, and then you'd be like, wow, she's really smart. She's like super observant, and then you would kind of like buy her more as like his equal and someone who you were kind of like, oh, okay, now I can see why Harper would maybe be willing to put her on this mission. You know, like it would like make a little more sense and would give her character more complexity. So it's just like there's like all these opportunities that the movie misses, which I find surprising given that Kep is like typically a pretty strong writer, you know. But
remember, this was a blacklist script that shoehorned Jack Ryan into it, was rewritten 5 or 6 times. Then David Kep gets to rewrite it and puts his finishing touches. Then this movie absolutely was edited to hell. There's no way a movie in 2014 like this on this scale is supposed to be 100 minutes long. Okay. Yeah. But this is just, it's one of those funny and egotistical things we talk about when it comes to adaptations of pre-existing IP into franchises. I find it, again, funny and egotistical that you have countless Jack Ryan books, right? Spanning different eras, everything. But no, we have to create our own Jack Ryan movie from scratch. And I just find that such an... that's Hollywood. You know, like, we have all of this pre-existing IP. It's the Star Wars thing, right? It's the Star Wars legacy stuff. The sequels had thousands, Trev, thousands of stories in book form, in comic form, in so many different forms to go with that people loved, that wanted to see on the big screen. And instead, Disney was like, no. and just threw it all out and then repeated it sort of, you know, only poorly. And that's what this movie feels like. It feels like, let's throw everything out, let's restart. And again, it comes off just so generic and paint by numbers. And again, it's not the worst movie in the world, of course not.
I agree with what half of what you said, but to play devil's advocate,
sure.
You meant, because like I think we generally enjoy more of the MCU than we don't. And we talk about how like the MCU is like kind of infamous for like not really adapting any of the comic stories of these characters, just taking the general idea of the characters and even using the names sometimes, like Civil War, and be like, well, we're not actually doing the comic Civil War, we're just doing our own version of it. So that's kind of nothing new, right? And like, and even like we and I both said we both really enjoyed the first season of the TV show Jack Ryan, which is also just an original story and not one of the novels, right? So it's not, and even the Bond series, eventually they moved beyond the Fleming books, and you know, most of the like a lot of the Bond movies are original stories. I think with this one, it probably was a case of like, well, we're rebooting again. We already did his actual origin book, Hunt for October, and then we took Some of All Fears and retrofitted it into an origin story. Do we really want to take a third Clancy novel and again change it into an origin? Right. Or do we just want to like, and by that point, as we said, the books had already got to the point where Ryan was like the president now, and it was more about Jack Ryan Jr. So maybe it was just easier to kind of like shove that all aside. I don't necessarily have the problem with them coming up with the original story. I have a problem with them forgetting what the Jack Ryan character is. That's the bigger issue, obviously. You know, when you treat him like Shadow Recruit, like that title, that sounds like a John Clark movie. You know, that sounds like I'm going to watch a movie about a guy who gets put into this like oh my God, he's going to be this like kick-ass CIA agent, and that's not what we want to see from Jack Ryan. Like even like, boy, if you were willing to make this movie a little longer, like what if he had just been sent to Moscow as like the analyst, and it was supposed to be John Clark who does all the action, and John Clark gets like hurt, and they're like, oh my God, Jack, you and your wife have to go to dinner with this bad guy, you know, and it's like, well, I'm not supposed to do that, you know, but the fact that they are saying like, no, you are the guy, like that's the weird disconnect in this movie.
Yeah. Did you you know what I found interesting was the Sum of All Fears was, you know, rumored to have been changed because of 9/11.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they had to speak for that and say, no, it really didn't change much. But however, it was like a topic of conversation. I found it very interesting that 9/11 becomes the plot inception point for Jack to enlist.
Very first thing you see in this movie is 9/11, which felt a little manipulative to me, for sure.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those things that, like, I guess, I'm Canadian, you are American, and it does seem like a lot of people have stated that was the moment that they were
that's the thing is I was just about to say my caveat on that is it feels manipulative on a filmic level, but at the same time it is also very true that a lot of Americans enlisted after 9/11 because it stirred up a sense of patriotism in them. So it's not on Jack Ryan that the wars we got into after 9/11 were all extremely misguided. We buy him as a character who signed up for the right reasons, I guess. Can I talk finally about the other positive to me though, because we've been kind of dancing around it. And I want to ask you, and I know you obviously dislike this more strongly than I do, but I do think Kenneth Branagh, not necessarily Kenneth Branagh the director, but Kenneth Branagh the actor is putting in a lot of work to class this up.
Oh yeah,
and I do think he is a great villain in this. And like I said, I really I think anytime he's on screen, the movie actually does come to life. And I think in particular the dinner scene where he is trying to seduce Kathy, and it's obviously all part of he doesn't realize he's playing into their plan, but the conversation he has with her where it's revealed that he's actually sick and dying, and then he talks about his son, what happened to his family, and then we start to realize where he's coming from and why he would want to do this terrorist act to take out the US and everything. It's like he's a compelling villain. He deserves a better movie than this, but I'm happy he's there because he's one of the highlights for me.
Oh, for sure. Most of the enjoyment that I got out of this was every scene he's in.
Yeah.
He is commanding. It makes sense. He's a Shakespearean actor. I mean, he's he knows how to block a set and command the stage. Yeah. So he's great, and he has a great Russian accent. So you buy it, and he's got a great stoic look too. I really did like the kind of the mental game when Jack meets him for the first time, ready to look at their books basically, and he's like, actually I sold everything and there's no books to look at, sorry. And then Jack's like, well, let's go for dinner, and he's like, no, I'll take you to dinner. That was cool. I like that. And like you said, the scene when he's talking to Kathy at the restaurant is pretty amazing. Those are two great actors having a great scene together. I wish it was in a better movie, but that scene on its own is very interesting because Kathy is playing up her flirtation, and it's working on Victor, right?
Yeah.
And you buy that it's working on Victor, especially when the plot point of him dying, or I guess the character development of him dying, when they're sitting at the table, Kathy's a doctor and says, you have cirrhosis of the liver. How much you got? How much time do you have left? Because I've noticed, your discoloration, blah, blah, blah. And then the look that Kenneth Branagh gives her is almost a look of acceptance that he's dying, reminded again that he's got an expiration date, and then a respect for her. Yeah. And I think doing all those 3 or 4 things in a look is very, very impressive. So I really like Kenneth Branagh in this. He's great. He's even when they kidnap her, and then he's on the phone with Jack, and he's like, I have the light bulb in her mouth right now.
Oh yeah, the light bulb in the mouth is actually pretty intense, and
that was good.
Very disturbing, really actually. Yeah,
big time.
The way when he's describing what happens if you bite down on the light bulb and how painful of a death that will be.
Yeah, great villain.
Yeah. And in fact, I said I like his work in this more as an actor, but even on a director level, I agree with you that most of this movie just feels kind of flat. But what he is really good at is scenes of intercutting between stuff to up tension and excitement. That whole sequence where Kathy is left with him at the dinner table and she needs to keep him distracted. That's actually a really effective scene where it's intercutting between that and Jack back across the street in the office trying to get plug in a flash drive and get the information out. That kind of stuff always works if you have at least a competent director, where you're feeling the tension of, oh my God, is he going to do this in time? And they've stolen his wallet and they got to get the wallet back into his pocket before he notices it. And just watching the CIA kind of at work, how they pull that off, that's kind of exciting. And then later, I actually really do also like the sequence where you're seeing his son, the terrorist operative in America, get activated. and kind of like watching him like, you know, murder his like fake family and then, you know, take out this FBI agent and like, as you know, this idea of it's building up to, you have to like make us invested in the fact that we're building to this potential major terrorist attack. This movie obviously doesn't have the guts to go through with it the same way some of All Fears does, but like watching like the potential buildup of it is kind of effective in this as well. I think that stuff is handled fairly well. Yeah. Even if some of the singular action scenes and just dialogue scenes feel a little bit more half-hearted.
And also, Jack is never reeling with his injury. That did bother me on a rules level, especially because the movie goes out of its way to explain, finally, out of these five films, they've only ever hinted at him being injured on a mission. And this movie starts showing him get injured and, again, goes through the rehab, meets Kathy, all this stuff. And then he, like, literally never reels with it. And I don't understand why.
It's strange because I get the sense from the other movies and like even the show that like we are led to believe that like it's a past injury and it's not something that affects him on an everyday, you know, because like it's not like any of the other movies like acted like it was like debilitating to him at any level.
Totally.
The problem is, as you just said, on a cinematic level, though, when you dedicate the first 10 minutes of your movie to it, then it feels weird to not have it be an issue following. Yeah. Like, it almost works better to only tell us it in exposition, because then we just go like, okay, well, that's a thing that just passed, and we don't have to think about it. But we watched it happen to him, and it was horrible. And then we watched him go through rehab, and then you said it's weird that it never comes up again. Like, even if, like, after that first fight in the hotel, we'd seen him like, oh, my back, you know? Like,
I know, like, anything.
Yeah.
And again, this is the first time we're seeing him as Action Man, right? Like we really only saw Ben Affleck race around places, you know? Mm-hmm. But in this one, we see him like really doing missions, getting in fistfights, pulling out his gun. I don't know. It's just very strange.
It's like the best Jack Ryan story, you know, like Hunt for October, there's a moment where Ryan has to like go into the bowels of the submarine with a gun and try to like confront this saboteur, right? But he's super nervous about it, and like he doesn't want to get into a gunfight. And so All Fears, as you just said, he's in a terrible helicopter accident when the bomb goes off, and then he has to kind of like race through like the post-nuclear wreckage in the city. But that's kind of the extent of his action. Otherwise, Clark handles all the action. This one, it's like you can feel like this is a movie designed to like, we eventually got to get him on that Ducati motorcycle and have him race through the streets of New York and chase this ambulance and then fight this guy in the sewer. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily. It's fine when other characters do that, and he's just the guy that's figuring out the money. You know, like that's fine. But
I guess, you know, I don't think this episode was contentious at all. By the way, I think we're both like straddling this high wire of this movie of like, is it okay or is it bad? You know, like it's like right there. And funnily enough, when a movie's like that, those are usually the movies we hate talking about.
Yeah.
And that is kind of, now that I'm like thinking about it, it is kind of interesting that this movie can pull at least a reaction that is worth discussion from me and you for as long as we've been going, you know? So like, is this a good movie? In my opinion, no. Is it a bland laundry movie? I guess, yeah. So it's a weird one. I'm torn. I don't think I'll ever watch this movie again. I bought like a year ago, I bought the 5-pack Blu-ray. One of those great packs of Blu-rays that is just like singular, you know, they can fit perfectly on the shelving. I don't think I'll rewatch this one.
Yeah.
I guess we'll, you know, I think wrapping up my thoughts on it, I'll throw it to you right now is, I think this is just kind of bland and generic, and wouldn't watch it again. But Trev, a summation of your thoughts.
The summation of all my fears.
Wow. And that's why we get paid the big bucks, everybody.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't necessarily think this is a great movie. I'm not even sure it's a good movie, but I'm more forgiving of it because I think, as I said, I kind of look at it more in the terms of it being like, I turn off the Jack Ryan part of my brain a little bit, and I'm looking at this as like more just a fun, dumb spy movie, which I kind of like the hook of like a spy who inadvertently has to get his like girlfriend involved in this mission, and then I think it has a great villain. So there's like just a couple elements enough, and it's so short, and it's like, and to me, like what this has that like Some of All Fears doesn't have is like because it's short, and because it's just kind of consistently silly all throughout. It doesn't have the really boring first half that I felt Some of All Fears did. Like, like I mentioned, like this is what I mean about how I kind of like them equally, but for different reasons. Like I think Some of All Fears at its highs is obviously its highs are much better. But also like the main character that I'm interested in is barely in the movie. And I thought the first half was such a slog. Right. This movie's like dumb, but it's dumb from start to finish. And that's a very quick ride, So it's like, I don't know. I agree. It's a complicated one. I don't know. Boy, I gave Some of All Fears like a 3 out of 5. So I guess if I'm saying they're equal, I'd have to do that with this one too. But I'm admitting that's a very generous like 3 out of 5. Sure.
Slightly, maybe I don't want to say ironic, but maybe.
Yeah, a little bit. Like I do think like it's weird because like I think on one level I kind of wish it wasn't a Jack Ryan movie because then my issues with like this poor version of Jack Ryan would be forgiven.
Same.
But at the same time, if it wasn't a Jack Ryan movie, maybe I wouldn't find it interesting at all because part of what I think is like interesting is seeing this 2014 attempt at Jack Ryan. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like even when something fails, you're like, oh, isn't that kind of neat to see like what they tried to do with this character and how this was like the misstep too far that led them to have to like take it back to TV. You know, in these long running franchises, sometimes like the moments where they go so awry are fascinating in retrospect. And they're kind of like, that's what's interesting about them to you. And that's how I feel about this one. So yeah, like a goofy, dumb laundry spy movie, and I might never watch it again either, to be honest, but I didn't just as like this. I'd say the same thing for this. I said about Some of All Fears. I just didn't hate watching it.
Sure.
I just kind of like was like, yeah, okay.
It's funny though, like you said, it's interesting. 12 years it takes to make this movie in between the other one, and then only 4 years is when Krasinski's Prime show comes out in 2018.
They were like, they didn't take them long after this one to be like, no, we're done.
Yeah.
Do you think Chris Pine like opened the trades one day and saw the announcement about a new John Krasinski Jack Ryan show? He's like, oh, well, I guess I don't need to, I don't need to wait for that call anymore.
Yeah, totally. Just a complete ghosting. Yeah. So, Trev, I think it's a good place to put a pin in this film on its own. But listeners, we usually do a spin-off show every once in a while called Success to Series. And this is one of those franchises that probably would have had its own episode dedicated to it, but instead we gave it a month, I guess, now that I think about it. But Success to Series is usually we talk about a successful franchise that went through, and it's we talk about the pros and how much we love it. Now I'm a little newer to this franchise, so we just didn't think that would be appropriate. However, I think it's a good idea, or we think it's a good idea, to at least do what we do on those episodes, which is we rank them. Usually our rankings are pretty interesting because they're usually all over the place with Success to Series. So I'm interested to hear this. So one at a time, Trev will give his list ranking, and then I'll give my list ranking and give a brief, summation of your thoughts on those movies, starting, all 5 movies, The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger, The Sum of All Fears, and Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
Again, why? Why can't it just be called Shadow Recruit? I hated this trend. Remember, in 2012 we get Jack Reacher. We also get John Carter. 2016 we have Jason Bourne. Mm-hmm. Do you remember around this time too? They were talking about doing a 6th Die Hard that was just going to be called McClane. Yeah, I was like, come on, man. I was actually really worried around this time that they were going to make a Bond movie just called James Bond, and I'm glad that never happened. I actually kind of disagree that I don't think this ever would have been a Success to Series episode because I think you would agree. It's like I think our feelings on this franchise are a little lower than some of the ones we like to highlight for those episodes, right? And like because you mentioned last time how I'm a big Jack Ryan fan, and it's only true in the sense that I like love the first 3 movies, and then I like the TV show quite a bit, and then there's these 2 others that I'm like, oh, whatever. So yeah, my rankings would go. My favorite. I'll just go 1 to 5. My favorite is by far Hunt for October. I just think like they nailed it right out of the gate. That's just such a great tense submarine naval thriller. Alec Baldwin is a great Ryan, but of course Sean Connery kind of steals the show. But damn, that's a good movie. And then I would just swap the Harrison Ford ones. My number 2 is Clear and Present Danger. I like that one a little bit more. I don't know if that's like kind of the general consensus, but that one does have Willem Dafoe as John Clark, and I think he kind of elevates that a little bit, and I think that one's just a little bit more fun. And then I would do Patriot Games. And now I agree, my issue with those two is I don't think Harrison Ford is as successful as Jack Ryan because you just only see Harrison Ford, but those are still two like just really good, 90s era spy thrillers. And then I hate to say it, I'm gonna put Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit next and Some of All Fears below it. But let me tell you, this is like we're talking about like a hair difference here. I like both of them equally. I dislike both of them equally. I just have different issues with both and different positives on both. I don't think either of them feel necessary to me in the franchise, really. I love that initial trilogy. And then even though we're leaving it out, I came back to the love with the TV show, which I know I haven't finished. But as I said, even from what I've watched, I will probably say that Krasinski actually, to me, is the best Jack Ryan in terms of performance and nailing what I would like to see from the character. So yeah.
We'll have some agreements here as usual, or not usual. I don't know. Hunt for Red October for me, number 1. No notes.
Yeah.
Just a brilliant movie. Expertly crafted from start to finish. I mean, John McTiernan directed that movie, and his pre-prison life was great. The next movie, of course, Clear and Present Danger. I agree. I felt it was cool to see Jack back to political intrigue and military exercises and all office analysis. It's a quieter, more reserved Harrison Ford performance, I felt, compared to Patriot Games. So I welcome that. It's a little long, though. It's a little overlong on that movie.
Yeah. I kind of think both the Ford ones are, honestly. But
Yeah. The next I would put Some of All Fears, actually. I quite enjoyed that movie. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. Like I keep saying, it's a really good conversation, but I just felt those 3 movies that I just mentioned were the most Jack Ryan of both being Jack Ryan. And I say that because the next one I liked was Patriot Games. This is a really good Harrison Ford movie, and he's a little too action hero in this. Yeah. And I thought it was a really cool revenge flick, but not a Jack Ryan movie almost at all.
Great Sean Bean performance though too.
Oh, it's awesome. And the whole climax on the boat and everything. Again, this movie was cool. This movie's cool. It was funny because when I watched it back in November. And I wrote on my Letterboxd here, if I had a nickel for every 90s movie I watched this year, starring Harrison Ford as a U.S. officer fighting the IRA, I'd have 10 cents because I watched The Devil's Own as well last year. So, have you seen that? With Brad Pitt?
That's another one where I think I don't want to say I've seen it, but I feel like I've seen pieces on cable a lot. Yeah.
Okay. And then last is Shadow Recruit. I just, for all the reasons I've said, but yeah. A solid franchise all around. Two failures, but I still liked one of them more so. But FebruaRYAN was a success. I think this it was nice to get back to real movies.
Yeah, that's the thing. They both feel like real movies, if nothing else. Yeah. Coming off of some real stinkers, and I'm kind of in the space of I know a lot of people will disagree with me. I from what I can see, people really, really hate Shadow Recruit more than I do. But to me, it's kind of the thing about this series is there's no total piece of shit movie. That's the benefit of this series. But as I said, as I walk away from it, seeing how I kind of like these last two, but I'm very cognizant of the issues that they had and the problems. I think I said this last episode too. I kind of do feel maybe the small screen is a better place for Jack Ryan because as you said, there's just so many better spy cinematic, franchises. Jack Ryan, for whatever I like about that character, it is really hard for him to compete with Ethan Hunt and Jason Bourne and James Bond, of course. I'm just an analyst. that's tough. That's tough to do a 10 film franchise with or whatever if that's what they're aiming for. So TV probably the right place for it. Attention, this is a breaking news alert. Good evening, everyone. This is Trev, subbing in for Chris, our usual breaking news alert correspondent. Chris is feeling a little under the weather as I record this. He has lost his voice after Canada Hockey's victory over U.S. Hockey in the inaugural Four Nations face-off. You might want to go back and listen to our Sum of All Fears episode to understand why Chris would be so emotionally involved in that and why he might have lost his voice after that game. So just bear with me. I am taking over for one of our breaking news segments here because I felt it was important to cut in during this discussion about the future of the Jack Ryan franchise and where it might lie. Longtime listeners know not only of Chris's beloved simulation theory, but also how often certain things make him believe that the two of us are actually controlling this matrix through this podcast. Very often we talk about something in the moment, and then very shortly after our episode, news breaks about that very thing we were talking about. And in fact, we were talking in these episodes about the potential cinematic continuation of the Amazon Jack Ryan series with John Krasinski. We mentioned that we'd heard some rumblings about a potential movie, maybe following the recent conclusion of the show, but we weren't really sure when or even if that was actually happening, given how often you hear about these new cinematic projects nowadays that don't actually end up going anywhere. However, days after recording this episode, a first look image was released online, and all the movie websites picked it up, of a new Jack Ryan movie starring John Krasinski, meant to follow and continue the story of the TV series. So it is in fact happening. There's an image out now. It is on its way. We are getting a new Jack Ryan movie. Whether that movie will have sequels of its own to follow, or whether it will be just a kind of a one-off, we don't know yet. It's also unclear at this point whether this will be given a theatrical release, or whether it's simply going to be an Amazon Prime exclusive movie. You've heard us talk about how we believe Jack Ryan is probably better off as a small screen property, so I have my own ideas about which approach they probably should go with, but either way, we do know it's officially happening. But wait, that's not all, because in further breaking news, that's right, I have more breaking news, we also learned a few days after that after a period of only being a financial and distribution partner through their acquisition of MGM a while back, Amazon has now entirely gained creative control of the James Bond franchise. That's right. Longtime Bond producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson have now agreed to allow Amazon to fully take control of the series after many months of creative disagreements that were kind of holding up the continuation of the series following the Daniel Craig run. I think it's safe to say most Bond fans, and you can certainly include Chris and I in that Bond fan camp, as evidenced by our previous Success to Series episode on the franchise. Go check that out. But most Bond fans, I think, see this as potentially very bad news, given that Bond really was the last big remaining cinematic IP franchise that had resisted overall corporate control and was always instead family-controlled, which is why the series had largely avoided numerous spin-offs and dilutions of the brand. But it seems a given now that Amazon will greedily exploit the Bond IP as much as they can with additional spin-offs and the like, to say nothing about the questions of how they'll even handle the main Bond movies. You know, their track record in original movies is not that strong. But it's also worth noting in this moment because we mentioned in our Sum of All Fears episode last time that Jack Ryan, the franchise, is often somewhat reductively referred to as the American James Bond. But now, with both properties under the control of Amazon, you can bet our chances of an actual James Bond Jack Ryan crossover just greatly increased. And I'm willing to bet conversations of the sort have already happened over at Amazon. So I guess just stay tuned. Maybe we will soon have some more additional failed franchise starters to cover here with Jack Ryan, James Bond, or even a combination of both. So join me in wishing Chris a speedy recovery. And anyway, now we return to our original programming already in progress.
Okay, we love our themes. We have wrapped up FebruaRYAN, and we're moving on. And we have a March to April event here, Trev. You know, we like to, we don't like making fun of actors, okay?
No.
We do not like making fun of actors. But sometimes we have to talk about these actors in depth.
Sometimes they force our hand.
They push our hand. Yeah, for sure. And this is an actor who has inexplicably escaped our purview for the last 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So
we're making up for lost time, baby.
Yeah, and he's racked up a few. So we thought we would bang them out over the springtime here. And this is a 2-month event dedicated to Mark Wahlberg and we're calling this Mark Wahlberg and the Yucky Bunch.
Yep.
My pièce de résistance. So we are starting March 11th, Planet of the Apes from 2001. March 25th, The Italian Job from 2003. April 8th, Mile 22 from 2018. April 22nd, Spencer Confidential from 2020. Now, I might add, we could probably throw a few more in there if the months were longer.
Look, this franchise ain't ending anytime soon, so don't worry. Mark may have his day again, even after this.
Yeah, Mark's in a... Well, we'll talk about him in depth, but he's in a... that guy likes his bank account full. And...
Believe me, I don't want to get into it too much now, obviously, but I have a lot of thoughts on Mark Wahlberg. So yeah.
You know what I forgot to mention earlier in the episode, because I'm going to mention here. It's cool that we're getting a Planet of the Apes talk out of this, because maybe apes are back on track, with this new franchise that's happening, and then me and you both love the newest modern trilogy and a lot of the old movies too. So it's a big franchise, so that's kind of cool. So a little bit of Matrix-y stuff going on there, but also we didn't even mention in Shadow Recruit that another timely thing about inflation trying to decimate the U.S. economy. I don't know if you thought about that.
Yeah, I was more distracted by the fact that a big chunk of Shadow Recruit takes place in Dearborn, Michigan, which is where I was just recently teaching. So I don't know if you clocked that at all, but
no, I clocked Dearborn, Michigan for other reasons that were detrimental to the way the world is going right now.
Oh, well. You should have been like, "Oh, that's Trev teaches at U of M Dearborn. How exciting!" Instead of getting all on your Trump high horse.
My high horse. Okay. Mark Wahlberg and the Yucky Bunch. I will say there was a little moment maybe a week ago that I thought that we should name it March Wahlberg, but I couldn't incorporate April. I couldn't do it.
I know.
I tried.
This is tough.
I tried. I can only, my skills can only go so far. Okay. Follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there. Like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Star rating would be great. Almost forgot what I was supposed to say. And then just, join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And follow along with Mark Wahlberg and the Yucky Bunch. It was fun to have a little bit of just friendly debate.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't like... Neither of us were dying on a hill here.
There would have been more debate if you had caught me when I first saw this, because I remember actually, for whatever reason, I was like more high on it when I saw it in the theater originally. I remember at that time I was really like, I don't know why people don't like this. I think it's pretty good. And this time I watched it, I was like, oh okay. But yeah. I was going to say, but I was like, no, sometimes I worry about making the episode like too timely of the moment. I was going to mention, maybe I should have because it's kind of fun, but I was going to say, like, part of the reason I also think I kind of enjoyed it more than you is I watched it the same day that I saw Captain America Brave New World. I was like, well, I just watched a much worse like political thriller, so
sure.
maybe I'm grading this on a curve, based on that. But, yeah. I mean, the main thing I wanted to talk about, and we did hit on it, was like how it just is like the ultimate, like, oh, this is the post-MCU Jack Ryan. We're like, yes, it's a shared universe now, and like the action's bigger, and it's like, oh god, like that's not what this franchise is supposed to be.
Yeah, and Jack can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It just he gets a cut on his forehead, and that's about it. So very very superhero. They're superheroing him. Because even here, you know what? I never said this. I was actually gonna quote Peter Travers, saying it's a product constructed out of spare parts, and it's hard to care when Jack turns operational and becomes a CIA RoboCop.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mention that, but that was kind of where my feelings were going when I was watching it.
The only note I had that I didn't get to, but I mentioned it in a different way, was I just have a note that says Chekhov's Ducati. There's a dumb part at the beginning where he's like, "Oh, you got the Ducati, huh?" And it's like, "Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
We also didn't mention Combe Fiore being in both those movies.
Oh, I know.
Fuck.
That's crazy that we didn't do that.
How stupid.
Yeah.
Do you think he even realized?